maybe going, if it was to go now, where you've only got a small handful of specialist cannabis pharmacies that can really handle that kind of thing, um, you would probably think to yourself, well, could they tolerate the increase in volume? Um, they probably would all topple over if it was going to happen quickly.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Harmonia Podcast. We are joined here today by the lovely Jon Nadler, who is a patient advocate and a entrepreneur in the medical cannabis industry. I'm going to hand over to John. Hi, John.
Thanks for having me. Sure. So, yeah, in 2017, I changed my mind on what cannabis can do. I always knew it had some amazing powers, but in 2017, when my wife's aunt was terminally ill with cancer, we decided that enough was enough, and we wanted to try and help. And everyone was talking about cannabis being the thing that can kind of get her out of bed. She was bedridden on the ground floor of her house and couldn't go up the stairs, and her mood was very low, appetite was bad, and all those kind of things. And so we thought, okay, well, there's nothing to lose, and we couldn't find it anywhere. I mean, to be honest, that was the first time I realised that you could never find it under prescription anywhere, even last resort. And we ended up finding a Rick Simpson oil, which is basically a kitchen-made cannabis extraction using some kind of solvent. And we got it for her, and she was taking it. And after a few days, she was out of bed and she was wanting to cook and do all the kind of things that we used to kind of love doing with her. And it was kind of that moment for me where I thought something is going to happen here. It's obviously very, very powerful stuff, and I need to look more into it. So I did. In 2017-18, I came up with a CBD range of products and brought them to market. And I realized that everyone was taking CBD suddenly, and no one was understanding what they should be looking out for in terms of how it's helping their ailments and things like that. So I built an application that we put onto iOS, the Apple platform, which could help patients who are taking CBD from buying it over the counter with a clear understanding of how things are being improved, so how their sleep's benefiting or how their pain levels are going down. And then after a few months, went from there to needing some cash to keep the business going, and was looking around town for how I could raise capital for it, and ended up meeting a small cannabis fund that had just started, and they decided that they wanted to buy the business. And it was quite early for me. I had 50 listings in pharmacies and health food shops in London mainly, and I decided that actually it was a good opportunity for me. So I sold the company and went in as their first employee, really. And from that point onwards, my brief was to go and build the medical ecosystem. It was a few months before legalization in the UK in 2018. And yeah, I just kind of held on to that baton and ran with it, really. The first thing we did was we built an education platform called the Academy of Medical Cannabis, and it was produced with an amazing team of doctors and other professionals. And Professor Barnes was at the forefront of that particular learning development program. And there was a couple of other doctors like Danny Gordon, a few others that were in there as well, Leon Barron, and people were helping out. And we ended up producing this really amazing piece of work, which was about 20 modules long. And then suddenly people from different countries were coming to us, and we were turning it into 7 or 8 different languages. And before we knew it, we had doctors and healthcare professionals using it all over the place. And then from there, we just went on and just built the rest of it. So we built the rest of the ecosystem. Again, there was an amazing team that was put into play there, and some of them in other cannabis companies in the UK now, and some of them are working for European businesses. But we all came together and started to build, what does a cannabis clinic look like, and what does a cannabis pharmacy look like, and how do you get distribution working properly, and how do you create, a group of medicines that you can actually have on a formulary and have prescribed to patients. So that's been the last kind of 4 or 5 years of my career. And end of 2022, I moved away from which had operations in other parts of the world as well, Australia, Portugal, and so on. But the main thrust of it was the UK and Channel Islands. And now I'm kind of just moving around and trying to navigate where the industry is going next. So that's me, and not so much of a nutshell, but more of a 10-minute dialogue.
No, wow, that is absolutely incredible. And I love the way that you guys put education at the forefront. It's really important, especially for Schedule 2, which is an unlicensed medication, to have, I suppose, that educational background for cannabis naive patients, for GPs, especially whilst trying to introduce a new, I guess, treatment, new treatment into the country. Yeah, yeah.
It was a new treatment for sure. It still kind of feels new to me, even after 5 years of it being openly available. Yeah, yeah. The education platform was just an absolute critical one for us, because there were no healthcare professionals that understood anything about it apart from a very small handful, and we were so reliant on those doctors putting their head above the parapet and saying, "Look, this is what cannabis can do, and if you're able to prescribe it, you should be looking to do so." So that was the main thrust of it, and the idea was that it actually launched on the first day of rescheduling in 2018. So it was kind of, everything hadn't happened at the same time. And to be honest, the first few weeks there was a massive spike of interest, and then suddenly it kind of started to die down a bit, and you had to kind of find ways to keep momentum going and so on. And what we decided to do is we pulled a PhD student in, and some other people around us as well, some really amazing people within that team. And we decided that we would build a library of all data from around the globe um, connected to cannabinoid medicine, uh, even though we knew that there were certain ways and methods for nice guidance to include cannabis for certain ailments. But we wanted to expose that, in the US and Israel and other parts of Europe, lots and lots of research had been done over the years and was really very credible for certain conditions. And we wanted to ensure that, the prescribing consultants had the opportunity to see that kind of intel before making their mind up on whether they should be thinking about using it as part of their protocols in clinical consultation. Um, and I think that tool was probably one of the pivotal points for us, because we just saw a massive spike in usage of the education platform online. And before we knew it, from that, we had a group of doctors that started to kind of, I suppose, bubble up to the top, who had gone through the process of spending hours and hours and hours online taking these education modules, and were very keen to now go the next step and work out how they can start prescribing. Um, and there was loads of things that could catch you out in those early days, and lots of them actually still are in existence now, where you have to go through a process for doctors to be able to prescribe. So they need their own pads, and they need to go through, and it's just cumbersome. But we were able just to handhold that process through for the first few doctors. And this is kind of the same time of the MCCS forming, I suppose. I'm trying to track back in my memory, which is not great. But the beauty of that was clearly, that suddenly this group of clinicians could come together and swap information, support each other, and do all the things they need to do to just feel very comfortable in taking on that pretty special thing of prescribing cannabis in the UK, when no one else had really done it before. And it's actually to the testament of those first half a dozen to a dozen doctors. I won't go through and name them all, but they obviously know who they are. And most of the industry, the cannabis industry, knows who they are still today because they're just, obviously prolific in the space. But it's because of those doctors that the the market of prescribed patients was able to start to grow. Um, and it was a very tricky period of time, and I'm kind of thankful that we're over that point now. But at that time, when you're kind of in it and you're trying to make it work, you're trying to kind of oil the wheels and make everything run smoothly. That that was a very, very awkward period of time indeed, because like it was just so challenging. Everything was challenging. Everywhere you turned was a new challenge. You had GPHC and CQC and the MHRA and the Home Office. And everyone was just focused on, okay, what does this actually mean in practice? And you're there first over the line, trying to make it work and come together. So you do have to take lots of the knocks at the same time. And again, it's testament to the team that we had built and the doctors that were attached to that as well, that were, I would say, okay with being the first over the front lines, but they were the ones that just continued to drive and drive and drive, no matter what the obstacles were that came up.
It sounds like everybody was very passionate about it, which is why it made it a little bit easier to go through that challenging experience. And I mean, with medical cannabis being on the rise for patients and the number of clinicians declining, how do you think we can try and approach that within the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually know the stats on the current number of prescribers, but I from snippets that I get from talking to people around town, it feels like it's around 150 that are writing prescriptions in the UK. And that is significantly smaller than anyone would have hoped it was going to be. I mean, just the sheer fact that there's 75,000 plus specialist doctors on the GMC register that can prescribe, and you've got such low numbers that are prescribing, it is really frustrating for everyone involved. Not least, obviously the patients that are trying desperately to access. And there are obviously very clear ways of accessing medical cannabis, and 43 plus clinics that are able to facilitate those consultations and prescriptions, but it's still a challenge. Um, well, everyone's talking about GPs. Oh, sorry. There we go. Back again. Sorry. Everyone's talking about GPs prescribing. Now, clearly, that is the pathway. You know that by opening up to GPs prescribing, numbers will go a lot higher. Many more patients have the opportunity to get access to it by seeing a GP as opposed to getting a referral or self-referring to a specialist. But I would imagine that because of how conservative this country is, we're going to make sure that the medicine supply chain is being handled in the right way prior to those doors opening, and that's just one of the different work streams that I'm sure are being looked at before it's open further to GPs prescribing. But yeah, you need to make sure that you have the consistent supply of the right medicines, and I think that there's a couple of very, very good cannabis organisations that are doing a lot of work on that front. Um, Whether that be going through the usual kind of RCT approach and trying their hardest to come up with different frameworks for R&D within pain, for example, which is something that Celadon Farm, UK-based farm, seems to be looking at quite closely, which is great. Um, but I think you'll see more research which will help it get there quicker and help prove to the powers that be that there's rigor behind this, and the supply chain of certain products that have gone through research are freely available. So I don't necessarily believe that um, you know, the market, the cannabis market as it is today, will all benefit from the opening up of prescribing to GPs when it happens. And I think that there's only a few, probably some of the larger companies that will benefit from that from a medicine perspective. And then on the pharmacy side, we're seeing some really interesting stuff happening with some of the larger groups that have got a distribution channel network towards the retail pharmacies. And I think that those retail pharmacies, they oh, there's sorry, thanks, just flashed up. Apologies. Those retail pharmacies, I think, when they're up and operational and very easily able to manage the dispensing of medical cannabis, so that any patient can go with their prescription, or their prescription is sent to a pharmacy close by to where they live, or a preferred online retail pharmacy. Then again, it's another tick in a box to say, well, that we know we can do it, as opposed to um, maybe going, if it was to go now, where you've only got a small handful of specialist cannabis pharmacies that can really handle that kind of thing. Um, you would probably think to yourself, well, could they tolerate the increase in volume? Um, they probably would all topple over if it was going to happen quickly.
I mean, I fully agree with you. Supply chain is, I think, a key area that the industry does need to focus on. And I agree. I don't think the pharmacies right now would be able to support a large influx of patients. I know for myself, in my personal experience, it's sometimes taken up to 3 weeks for me to get a prescription, particularly when it's sent to a newer pharmacy that I haven't used before. And there really shouldn't be that many barriers for patients, especially when it's medication that some of us do rely on a daily basis in order to function.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the NHS just couldn't take that. You know, there's absolutely no way that they would let that happen on a larger scale. So I think it's a case of, the education of retail pharmacists to be able to dispense medicine of this nature in larger volumes is something that just needs to fast track. And it looks like, from what I'm seeing, that that's exactly what's happening. And then you've got other businesses that are coming through who potentially could help with the increase in demand as well. So you've got some online platforms that are doing a pretty interesting job in trying to facilitate for lots of prescribers to be on one platform, and then have a back end that operates, that can churn through volume, and it's built for scale kind of thing. So yeah, I think you'll see a few of those come through as well, and that will again prove to the powers that be that, it could be time to flick the switch. Um, but in terms of the private businesses that are involved within the medical cannabis space in the UK, lots of them will suffer massively from a change like that. So, you know, benefits will see the ups, patients will see the upside. Negatives, you'll see lots of smaller companies in the market probably fall away. But that unfortunately is the nature of, kind of, I suppose, capitalist pharmaceutical, where there's winners and losers, and the bigger ones usually win. Um,
Yeah. No, no, that's no, no. It's true. It's true. It's very accurate, and I know that it does sound, I suppose, very heartbreaking for some people, because yes, that is your livelihood. But for other people, and I'm talking about, I think the figures are roughly 5.6 million people living in high impact pain, and that is just to mention the pain criteria. There's still the psych. There's neurology. There are so many other millions of people that are struggling that would benefit from this medication. So I'm rooting for me as a patient and for all patients.
but I am as well, and but I always kind of have to give myself a bit of a kick, because it's kind of, okay, but what does it actually look like? What does it mean? Because I think best case scenario is clearly that patients are able to go and get their medicine under NHS and therefore not have to pay for those medicines. And everyone's been arguing for that since day one. Um, but there's just these massive question marks about how realistic is that, and what does that look like? Because that isn't, unless it goes through the normal channels to get marketing authorized and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's very, very hard to see the NHS looking to support prescriptions. Um, One thing that's been interesting in the last few years is the private insurance cover that the UK population has gone up to around 22-23%, and that's big. And I think it's mainly because people are getting it as a perk with certain jobs that they've got. I mean, I don't necessarily believe it's because individuals are paying for their own health cover in larger numbers than they have been in the past. Maybe that is the case. Maybe people have got scared because of what's happened during COVID and they're taking the plunge. But I think it is being given as a perk more and more by corporates. Um, so if that was to open, and I've actually heard that some of the insurance companies are reimbursing for the consultation costs now for medical cannabis patients, which is really, really good. But this is obviously only impacting 23% of the UK population. So what about the rest? But these small wins, you have to take them, because look where we currently are. Currently everyone's paying for their medicine. So if we can find a way for the health insurance companies to come in and from their health economic reviews and studies, they are able to say, okay, well, clearly there's some benefit here, and we know that if we are reimbursing for their medicines, then that patient is not going to be taking X, Y, and Z medicines in 2 years' time or a year's time or whatever it might be. So, so, is there some value to be had there? Probably. Um,
I need to go review my insurance cover. I'm going to leave that as a note for myself and go and review it.
There we go. So I think that lots more patients that are eligible for medical cannabis could probably get it if they're covered by health insurance, private health insurance, and they are able to get it reimbursed that way. From a consultation perspective, medicine, that's the next step. How do you get them to open for that? And there has to be groups out there in the UK that are working with those insurance companies to make that a reality. And if there's not, there should be. It was a closed door. I mean, we looked at insurance companies, and the door was completely shut. So maybe things have changed now. But I just don't. But I don't. But I don't think that we're anywhere near reimbursed medicine by the NHS for patients when it comes to medical cannabis.
I mean, no, definitely not. And I mean, for myself, one of the areas that I feel we should really be focusing on is the MHRA, because medical cannabis is not even acknowledged by them. We do yellow card reporting, which is when a patient has a adverse reaction to a medication, they would need to report it to the MHRA. When it comes to medical cannabis, it's something that's actually not being regulated, and neither is there any information regarding medical cannabis on any of their websites because it's an unlicensed medication, and only the licensed versions, such as I think Sativex and stuff, would be the ones that is advertised on their website, and that includes devices. They don't necessarily recognize vaporizers as medical devices. So I think we need to start definitely there, before we can even get to the NHS, because I think acknowledgement that it is a medication that 34,000 people are on, and you're not even recognizing it as a medication. So I think that's an issue in and of itself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think that it's very easy to get lost when you're very close to medical cannabis on a daily basis, where either because you're a patient that's engrossed in wanting to understand more about it as a medicine to help your ailment, or because you're in the industry, attached to a business or whatever it might be. Um, there is this potential for you to feel like things are a bit more advanced than they are, um, but because you're just hearing about it a lot. But the reality is that no one, it's on no one's, it's not high up on people's agendas. It's such a small part of the pharmaceutical industry, and it's not on MPs' minds, and you know, it just feels like it's amazing that there's so many people that have been in the industry since the very beginning, or even way before rescheduling, who are just campaigning aggressively for it. And I know some of those key guys, and mums, dads, and just sick patients that are just fighting for, really, for themselves and for other people to just get a better care from the country they live in. And I think it's testament to those guys that we've been able to maintain the banging of the drum for so long. But can you imagine how weary they must be feeling? Because you're just banging and banging and banging, and you just aren't getting the change that people have been campaigning for so long. Um, and I think as time passes on, it there's more potential that the voice will get lost, because it will be, oh God, it's the cannabis people again, and no one wants that. But the reality is that that could easily happen. So I do think we need to find a way to, I suppose, reignite some of the thought behind why medical cannabis is such an important, not just last resort medicine, but potentially a frontline drug. And I think that that readjustment of thought, of seeing it as the great balancer, amazing for homeostasis in our bodies, great for mood and appetite and sleep and so on and so forth. That should be seen as something which could be useful before patients get to the point of hitting those biomarkers where they're classified as having a certain disease or ailment, where that's too late. It's just way too late. You need to go back 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years, and you need to focus on how can you use medical cannabis then to ensure that that patient stays as healthy as they can stay for as long as physically possible.
Do you know what? It's very interesting that you say that because with oh god, now I'm drawing a brain fog. Medical. Oh god, great. Oh yes, sorry. Yeah, the threshold. So it's very interesting that you say that. So one of the things that I always, I guess, drives me completely insane is the threshold in this country for, I suppose, considering a specific diagnosis, if that makes any sense. So I will explain. I have a friend, she's from another country, and she was feeling very, very ill. And unfortunately, because GPs often do not listen to you in this country, she got very fed up and decided to go home to do lots of bloods and everything. And over there was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. She came back and she showed them this, she showed her GP this, and they were like, well, we would have to run our own test. And they ran their own test, which came up near enough identical results. Yeah. However, in the UK, these results do not meet the criteria for rheumatoid arthritis. Despite the fact that she's got all of these symptoms, and I also have my own example in terms of my arthritis diagnosis. Even though they found inflammation, they said they didn't find enough inflammation in order for it to be characterized as anything concerning. Had it not been for other pain consultants involved and sort of putting pressure on rheumatology to actually just try and rule it out, rheumatology decides that they wanted to prove a point, which is, I'm going to send you for the scan, and in this scan, it's going to, you're going to find nothing. Watch. And then I get to the scan, and what does the scan do? Confirm the diagnosis. So those bloods that were borderline, for the record, yeah, they did not feel met the criteria, despite the fact that I did have that condition. So a year of me arguing with them, my condition worsened during that time. And I just think about all of the other patients that do not meet the criteria, and therefore their condition is just worsening and worsening and worsening. And I'm just going to stop rambling now.
No, no, look, Berta, I mean, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that, but you're right. Is how many people are going through this exactly the same thing, and it's very easy to dump on the NHS, but clearly the NHS, com- compare it as a health system to other countries, and even though everyone's talking about it being on its knees, which it is, it's still a superior system to most. And
Just say, I'm sorry for interjecting. I'm from Ireland, and I can promise you the NHS is amazing. Yeah, go on.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think that it's very easy to dump on the NHS, and I always do my best to be as balanced as I can when I talk about the NHS, because they are under so much pressure, and whether that's monetary pressure or doctors infighting or the fact that they've got so many people on waiting lists for certain procedures, you name it, they're under pressure, and it doesn't feel like the taxpayers' money, even if they take more and more from us, is going to do the job that clearly needs to be done. So I think, and I think that over the course of the next few years, clearly there's lots of digital transformation programs and 5-year plans and 10-year plans and all these other things that are just happening within the NHS, which is amazing, and it's going to work. And there's obviously super smart brains around the table doing great stuff, but they they're, they are critically needed in certain circumstances. And obviously, whether that be a procedure, which is some kind of intervention, and they have to kind of open people up and do what they have to do, and treating certain disease states, and so on. And they have to do those things. So they have to look after the sick. But the more that the rest of the health and wellness market can help support the NHS by removing some of the pressure and working with patients by not thinking about biomarkers that are so close to them, the patient therefore requiring medicines for the rest of their lives, cutting their lifespan shorter than it should have been cut, working upstream and saying, well, okay, what are the other things we should be looking for much earlier on in life? And how can things like medical cannabis be one of the tools that are used to influence a much healthier society? So I mean, I hope that we can get there, and I think that there's more of an energy around that kind of message. You're not kind of banging the same drum, which is unlicensed medicine, last resort, to medicine. Are you eligible? Are you eligible? Have you had all these medications prior? Come on, let's just go back and say, how do we stop people from getting sick? Medical cannabis can help. Is someone's mood low? Have they got too much inflammation? Are they not sleeping properly? Have they not got appetite for some reason? Eh, Cannabis won't necessarily resolve the issue, but it will help to kind of give that kind of stability that people need to live a better life. So I hope that the conversation can move more to a front of foot, front line, as opposed to what it currently is.
Yep. Do you know what? We are going to end it on that because that is brilliant. So let's end it on that. John, thank you so much for coming on. It has been really, really great having this discussion with you. And I just want to say, as a patient, thank you so much for all of the hard work that you put in towards introducing medical cannabis into the UK and continuing to advocate for it being a viable treatment option for patients. For anybody that is interested in following some of John's work, links will be in the description. Thank you all for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you all next week, where we are going to be discussing the medical cannabis card.